I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about a really, really interesting set of events. We call them gray rhino events. And the important thing about gray rhino events, they are totally predictable. We can see them coming a mile away, and yet they happen, and we do not take action to prevent them. Or we have things in place to prevent them, but we're just not looking, not doing what we need to do. So we're going to talk about what those are, and a quick contrast to black swan events, which are totally rare, unpredictable occurrences. Right? They have far-reaching impacts. They could be like the stock market crash of the 30s, the global financial crisis of 2008, the once in a thousand year storm tsunami that hit Fukushima Daiichi in 2011, causing the meltdown of three out of the five reactors. There's just so many things that are totally unpredictable. Um, the COVID-19 China virus. Who was to predict? Now you might have seen it coming. You would think that it is possible, but when it happens, these are really, really rare events, and in many cases devastating. So now we get into events that are not so rare. They're highly probable, in fact, and yet they're often neglected. And we have these threats that pose a significant impact that are clearly likely to happen, predictable, but we're ignoring the warning signs, or we're not getting ahead of it and looking for these and addressing the things that might lead to these kind of events before they actually happen. So and for me, the number one issue right now is cybersecurity threats against our aging infrastructure. Think about what an advanced organization can do with AI and cybersecurity in attacking our aging infrastructure here in the United States. And again, I see that as a Gray Rhino event. I see it as totally foreseeable. And in fact, that is the number one topic that I talk about every month in a standing meeting with the vice chair of the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board, Tom Summers. This is the first thing on our radar and how we're going to try to get ahead of this because it is happening, it is coming, and the consequences will be dire. So let me get into it a little bit. So, what about the military? John has talked about this in previous instances here. We have airframes that have caused accidents over and over. And we know more accidents and more fatalities are going to happen, but somehow the military is not doing enough. Along the same lines, we have all these issues, not to go into them in detail, but procurement process for things like the F-35 jet fighter. Go read up on those and you'll see how horrible it is. Sexual assaults and suicides. These are things that we have precursor events far and wide, yet we're not doing enough. Low recruitment, retention, attrition, mental health issues, especially with those transitioning into the civilian workforce. So now a bit closer to home, over here on the DOE and NSA complex where we're building nuclear weapons, we have a lot of predictable events, recurring events. We know that based on previous incidents, these are going to continue to happen until we do something about it. And that's what this topic is all about. What can we do about these? Quality control failures, cybersecurity breaches. I should have probably listed that right behind safety. Regulatory noncompliance, supply chain disruptions, talent shortages, just to name a few things. So now the times that I want to spend on this topic is here. These are the things that I believe matter the most. How are we going to prevent these? What does it take? I'd like to give you some thoughts on that so you can take this and download this PDF later, air this out back at your organizations. See if you're doing enough in these areas to prevent these very predictable, preventable gray rhino events. And we'll talk about these specifically in the next few slides. Let me list them here. Organizational alignment. Make sure you have an established continuous improvement process. Make sure you're doing proactive risk assessments, that you have an effective root cause causal analysis system in place in your corrective action program. Make sure that as good as the front end needs to be in doing effective root causes, that you're also having effective back end actions to prevent recurrence. And that is often not the case. Here, you've heard us say that we have way too many administrative requirements in place in terms of corrective actions. We tend to default to the administrative and not use things like the hierarchy of hazard controls, right? Lean mistake proofing, uh, extent of the root cause determinations, the kind of things that are really going to increase the likelihood of preventing recurrence. So, all of these, if you have these things in place and they're working well, then you have a good possibility of preventing great rhino events. So, let me touch on some of these. Well, let me touch on all of these, sorry. Starting with organizational alignment. Now, what does it mean? We have to understand and telegraph, communicate to the organization that here are the kind of things that we're seeing. And where is that coming from? Probably from trending and analysis, which is not done very well. Once you understand the threats, you have to understand the defenses. So understand the threats to the organization, understand the defenses. What does that sound like if you remember from your classes, from one of the lessons? It sounds like risk management. It sounds like we're talking about the bow tie risk assessment model. Great model to keep in your mind. We would like to live on the left side of the bow tie risk assessment model, the prevention side. Constantly evaluate your defenses, look for gaps, close the gaps. That's going to help prevent the events. That's what we're talking about here. The next one, and please jump in with any questions, if you will. And if I don't see it, John's going to help me capture questions from the meeting chat or if you raise your hand. I want to read John's point here. Um, there have been 16 crashes of that Osprey airframe since 2000 with more than 54 deaths. And I know John has actually either investigated personally or was somehow tied into some of those crashes in the Marine Corps. Is that right, John? I don't remember exactly your involvement.
Yeah, so I was involved. I was near two of the crashes, and I had to tell one of the wives that her husband died. And I've also spoken to the commandant of the Marine Corps, the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps, in the aviation hallway about it. And we'll continue to do so until they actually address it.
John is on a mission to try to get them to do a deep dive root cause analysis with respect to the Osprey airframe. I would love to support John in that initiative. The next one on our list is continuous improvement. That means a lot of things to us in commercial nuclear. We have a lot of programs established to get us into continuous improvement, and they include management observation programs. How do we monitor performance? Anything that monitors performance, that includes not only the organizations themselves, their self-assessments, but also the independent and external oversight, QA, QC, and so on. So you're monitoring performance, a system to document gaps in performance, condition reports, a system to train and analyze those condition reports for early warning signs, a system for a graded approach to corrective investigations, so apparent cause, root cause analysis, right? A system for closing out the corrective actions, a system for measuring the effectiveness of those corrective actions, and then back to monitoring performance. So if you do that very well, you're going to be in a continuous improvement dual loop, which is where you'd like to be. Unfortunately, in my travels, those processes, if they're in place, there are missing pieces or they're not as effective as they should be. And that's something that I've been on the DOE campus helping to improve. Continuous improvement is often spoken about, but often not very well implemented. It's a sad reality. The third one on the list here is proactive risk assessments. Now, going directly to the bow tie risk assessment model, we need to understand how important it is to take every single dollar that you spend on self assessments and not do the Mickey Mouse smiley face type of self assessments. So, every chance you get, whether it's management observations, independent assessments, self assessment, QA assessments, doesn't matter, make those resources count. Every time the resources go out in the field, you're writing a check for those resources. What value did you get out of spending that resource on that assessment? And doing them proactively is much more powerful and cost beneficial. Correct. So, what are we trying to do? We're trying to pinpoint the hazards. We're going to look for the defenses, and we're looking for performance evidence as to what's not going well so that we can focus on those symptoms and then jump right into apparent cause and root cause, which brings me to the next point, which is effective root cause. And I'd like to make this point. I believe we spoke about it last month. I have given this particular doctrine many, many times, and I don't think I say it enough actually. I'd like you to take this back to your management and tell them that if you choose not to do a root cause, by definition, it means you are completely 100% willing to tolerate and take more events. You're completely good with the risk of repeat events of whatever happened. Because only when you do a root cause, when you have sufficient rigor in your causal analysis to get to the root cause level, will you have a likelihood of preventing recurrence of those deep seated causes, whatever you find. So think about that. If you're not doing a root cause, you have completely accepted the fact that you're going to keep having these events. How's that? That's the simple way of looking at root cause analysis. However, most organizations are doing 5 a year tops. And in the past, the classic reasons have been it's too hot, it's too heavy, it takes too many resources, it takes too long, it really slows us down. We get an inch thick of a report with 70 actions to prevent recurrence, and it's overwhelming. So many organizations don't like to go the root cause way because of the traditional methodologies in place and how it's done, the output. Bluedragon once again solved all that. The efficiency, the paradigm shifts, everything that Bluedragon does went to solve into, hey, we need to do more of these. The more you do Bluedragon root causes, the more you enhance safety, both industrial safety and nuclear safety. For most of us that work in the energy sector, and whatever other safety or financial risks you want to work on. So an effective root cause program cannot be understated. And that's the front end. And I talk about the back end being effective corrective actions. And we discuss strategies in this course, specific strategies. And I just added a new one that I broached about 2 months ago. So we've talked about the hierarchy of hazard controls to keep us away from administrative corrective actions. We've talked about lean mistake proofing, which is the complete elimination of the problem so that it cannot physically possibly happen ever again. Like you can't take your car out of park unless your foot is on the brake. That wasn't the case in the 70s because I experienced that at my prom. But now we have mistake proofing that makes it impossible. Another thing is, it's not enough to just address the specific root causes. We have to look for to what extent the root causes and contributing factors are impacting other areas, other people, other programs, and other equipment, right? Operability concerns. So we definitely have to do a better job of the extent of the cause evaluations, which is still not defined at the Department of Energy. They still use extent of condition and they mean extent of cause, and it's confusing to folks. But extent of condition is on the front end, the initial conditions. Extent of the cause, the root cause, is on the back end. And you have to do a good job there, or you leave things untouched. If you don't do extent of the root cause determinations, you leave things in place that are going to bite you. Think of it that way. So the back end has to work as well. So that's 3. The fourth one I just brought up, and it's going to be actually included. It is already in Bluedragon 3.0. The live version that I teach already has this in it. It's called GROSS, get rid of stupid stuff, or GROSS for short. And that's only been around since about 2016. It was put together by one of the big 4 consulting firms. But it basically tells us not to keep piling administrivia on top of administrivia and just layer more requirements on ourselves for as far as training and procedures. So look for things that don't make sense anymore and lighten the load. So that is something else that we'd like to see, because we just can't have every issue 70 corrective actions, and those 70 corrective actions are 69 out of 70 or more administrative requirements and more training. Doesn't make sense, right? We would be overwhelmed, and many organizations are overwhelmed. Okay, so what is the bottom line for bringing this topic up again? Well, the thing is that you, Bluedragon trained personnel, are in a great position with your level of understanding of proactive risk assessments, root cause analysis, effective actions to prevent recurrence, the risk matrix, the bow tie risk assessment model. You are in a great position to help the organization with preventable gray rhino events. You're in a great position to make a difference here. And that's what I wanted to reinforce today in this session. So your training is much more valuable than you might even think. We're not just teaching you to do a root cause. We're teaching you to think critically. Let me turn this off for a second so I can see you on screen and I can take your questions. We're not just teaching you a root cause methodology. It is an entire system that takes into account, like John said earlier, any tool that you've ever been taught. We envelope those tools very nicely, but we help you organize it better. We give you paradigm shifts to make it more efficient, more effective, more agile. We completely flip the equation on how we formulate teams, how we do focus groups. All that is different. The flow of how we do things is so much better. And along the way, we've managed to teach you about critical thinking and systems theory, two huge concepts that we use to anchor Bluedragon, and along with a lot of other science that is baked in that you don't need to know about unless you're in the master's program. But there's a lot of science behind what we do here. And one of the basic ones that everyone has heard of is the Swiss cheese model from James Reason. Okay, so you all know about the Swiss cheese model, but there's the 5 principles of high reliability organizations and mindfulness from Ellen Langer, and on and on. You don't need to know any of that. You just need to know that the process works. Follow the process. And with that, John, any comments before we open it up for questions, comments?
I took a look at the chat. There's no questions in there. I think we're good.
Thank you. All right. Any comments or questions about Great Rhino events or the preceding presentation? Brad, how you doing?
Hey, no question, just a statement, and it is very similar to who already took it earlier when John put in the Bruce Lee quote. And what I loved about it, the system overall, is the flexibility of it. And I've got written down over here is the flexibility of it, the template. Use what makes sense, move stuff out of the way, take away what doesn't. It's just, I know personally, I'm a rule follower by nature. So you set up the rules in the framework and I put the blinders on it as, oh, I have to do this, this, this. If it doesn't make sense, don't use it. If somebody has another tool that they're using, add it in. It's just try to be open to it.
Yeah, me too. That's kind of how I built it, because I needed to be flexible in whatever I encountered, and what I had to decide what I needed to solve the problem for my client. And I needed a system that allowed me to do that freely and not be caught up with. And when the client would tell me, you have to use an events and causal factors chart, I'm like, I got you covered. No problem. I've got that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Whatever they throw at me, I've got it covered. So very cool. And it looks like we will see you all in June. Are you one of the ones that signed up for the refresher?
Yeah, I'm one of the ones, because I haven't officially been trained through Lucid Spark. I'm still on the Post-it training.
Oh man.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with Post-its.
No way.
Sometimes old-fashioned works just fine. Low tech can be very valuable at times.
It works.
Yes, it does.
now that Lucid is FedRAMP approved, there's nothing prying me out of my lucid charts.
Yeah, that's a big
We're-
win, having them FedRAMP approved for sure.
Yeah, we're working the process to get that on site here.
Hey, thank you very much. Great to see you all. See you next month.